Hi, Commander Runningcloud here. Forgetting my crown. I can't forget my emblem of power. The topic of my talk is Elon Musk is Werner von Braun. Okay, so once again, this is going to go into the surreal. First, let me say that the bioweapons are simply adapting. So the bioweapons that are living inside my body and my head are simply adapting, okay? They've calmed down, but they are not dead. And they're starting to build up resilience to the cures once again. Building resilience to the cures. Because my face is starting to hurt again. And it's starting to dig into my flesh deep again. And it could be because I had my door open almost all night and almost all day with the screen, with the thin sheet up. And I did get a few mosquito bites. They could have, brought new strength contaminants in to empower the bioweapons. But if you were going to create a bioweapon that was going to live inside a human body, wouldn't you create it to be adaptable? Wouldn't you program it to survive, to find other ways to live, to evade detection? You would try to program it with everything that you could. Now, when I think about this and I think about, well, why me? There are a lot of reasons why. One, to keep me from my millions of dollars, billions of dollars in American property. But another reason is that the enemy can hear me articulate every result of their process. When I think about the Nazis from Operation Paperclip that sold out the American people to the bad ETs and let us be exposed for experimentation, wouldn't you want a feedback loop? Of course you would want a feedback loop. You would want your victims to openly communicate with you how effectively your bioweapon was working. Even when I think that we might be facing a catastrophic event, so why would you do this? This data is not necessarily to be deployed on Earthians. If you've got data on advanced, multi-dimensional, biologically based weapons, and you're a bad ET throughout the universe, you can use your data collected on me anywhere you plan to deploy this weapon. So I think that's why I can't beat it yet. We can't beat it yet. And I keep reporting on it because the good ETs are working on the solution. And we try a lot of things and they work for a while. But I have to admit, my greatest fear is that the creatures they're creating have the will to live, the will to survive, and they have been programmed with an intelligence that lets them work around any attempt to remove or eradicate them. And when you've got them working, in dimensions beyond 3D, where the only dimension that I really honestly can say that I totally beyond a doubt kind of know, well, you can do all kinds of things, okay? You can do all kinds of things when you're working beyond 3D to affect 3D, if you know what I mean. So I had my door open almost all night because, try as I may, although I believe I have my door secured and protected, the very fact that they cut the lock made me a little bit upset, a little bit nervous. And there was a lot of action out last night. So there was actually somebody who said, "Oh my God, you're still here?" I met you years ago when you first came here. A young girl outside the door. And I was like, wow, that was a long time ago in terms of my experience here in Houston, Texas, at the OYO Hotel, also known as a concentration camp. I didn't say all that to her, but I did let her know, oh, well, things have really, it's just a dangerous place to live. And I'm so embarrassed to still be here. And, things have just gone so downhill. But she actually said that when she met me, I asked her, was she a prostitute? And I do remember asking a couple of the young girls that, because I was trying to get them into the International Ladies Chamber of Commerce career training program. So I was trying to find out, well, what are you doing now? And this is a hotel. There are a lot of prostitutes here. Are you a prostitute? To kind of let her know that I'm not going to be judging sex workers, that I just want to do a job to help them develop themselves. And she said, that she thought that was so funny, but I felt embarrassed because when you hear something like that, you realize I don't know, I'm going to call it autism, social autism. Why would I say that to somebody? That's so rude. It sounded so rude when she told me. I'm like, I was that rude? Wow. And then I had to remember and think back, oh yeah, I remember. I was trying to recruit girls. And then I was trying to recruit children, for development programs. But the pimps don't want you to develop their employees. That makes you a serious threat. That'll get your face burned. Another thing that happened last night while the door was open and I'm looking outside and interacting with people is that my contact lens got cut. That hasn't happened in a long time because I've kept my eyes in here. I didn't look out there because I knew they could cut my contact lenses. So I was out there for some time. I actually talked to some people, asked a couple of men around at a certain time at night, are you the one that cut my door? Are you the one that keeps trying to break in? But I had the door open all night, getting fresh air in. The first reason I opened the door was because of the smell of gas in here. They don't send in hemp gas anymore. They send in another kind of gas, but it still has an effect on me. It took a very long time to even air it out of here, So I didn't get to sleep until maybe like 6 a.m. this morning, which would have been just 12 hours ago. But I had a very, very sound sleep filled with dreams. Oh my God. People constructing buildings, constructing homes for migrant refugees. After I took Prozac for depression over what they were doing to me at Yale, canceling my life and destroying my life dream to become a literature professor, my psychiatrist put me on Prozac for a brief amount of time until he found out more about Prozac, and then he took me off of it because he was a talk therapy psychiatrist. He was old school. He tried to help people by talking. He actually donated 5 years of free therapy to me. After the first year, it was hard for my husband to keep up the payments. So my psychiatrist saw me for free every week, except the 2 weeks he took for vacation each year. And he would just see me for every week. Come rain, come shine, come snowstorm, whatever it was, we would be there in his office talking, because I felt it was very important for me to be very self-conscious, have a strong sense of self-awareness about myself, my motives, what I was doing. I didn't want to just be reacting to stimulus. I wanted to be directing my activities because I really wanted to do a good job raising my children. And since I had experienced so much trauma as a child, from economic stress and social stress created by the environment that wouldn't let my mother rest, that wouldn't let my mother have any peace or happiness, because I grew up in that, I didn't want to pass it on. I didn't want to extend my dysfunctional adaptations unconsciously to my children. So I went to therapy every week for about 5 years. And at one point in time, for maybe 6 or 7 months, I was actually on Prozac. And while I was on Prozac, I lost my sex drive, which was perfect because there was no sex in my marriage. We had sex very infrequently. So not wanting it restored my power. I didn't have to cry or beg, although I'd gotten to the point where I was like, I'll just do without, because if I've got to cry, it's not any fun to do it. You know what I'm saying? If you have to say, please, I'm losing my mind, we got to have sex, then you just you don't want to set up that kind of pattern in your love life. So I just had gotten to the point where I'd be like, forget it, And after my daughter was born, I think it was 10 years before we did it again. I don't know. No, it wasn't 10 years, but it doesn't matter. It's none of your business. Why am I telling you all this? Well, I'm telling you all this to tell you that Prozac was great because it killed my sex drive. I want you to remember that when we start talking about transsexualism, abortion, and disrespect for marriage. Because one of the things that I'm going to get around to when I start talking about Elon Musk, Wehrner von Braun, is how the destruction of the reproduction, respect for human reproduction, had to be compromised and disrespected before you could even talk about bringing robots in to take the place of biological units. Before you could even get people to listen to the need for robots, you would have to prove that we don't have enough men. Another way that relates, I'm just going to go off on this for a minute. Another way that relates is creating robots for wars and launching satellites into the skies for wars. When human beings become so aware of the means of their oppression and the way the enemies, the Nazis, the Jews, the Europeans of the world, the way that they are actually gaining dominance, then even the Europeans are going to rebel against that. On Democracy Today, I watched a show from 3 days ago where a Jew woman in the Biden administration resigned. In a 9-page letter, she explained that she finally came to realize that other races are entitled to life too. That saving a life doesn't just mean saving a Jew. Now, I'd heard another Jew say that yes, saving a life is the most important thing. But you have to understand, this Jew man said, that the only lives considered human by Jews, Khazarian Jews, are the lives of other Khazarian Jews. The people of other races, cultures, and religions are not considered human. They're considered your 10,000 slave force. And the example that Jew used was that if you knew someone was going to fall off a bridge, if it was not a Jew, you wouldn't have any moral demand to risk your life to save him. However, if the life in threat was a Jew life, then you would have to save them. Now, I've seen over and over again that 3 Jews were killed in Gaza. 3. But they don't give the number of how many Arabs have died, because they want us to understand that 3 Jew lives are more important than any other loss of life that could possibly happen. 3, human lives are more important than the lives of 1,000,000,000,000 animals. So to have this contemporary Jew woman get up and say, I get it, I get it, I get it, I finally get it. Apartheid is wrong, and Israel is an apartheid. I never thought I'd hear a Jew admit that. Although if you had read the 1990 National Geographic article about the lives of the Palestinians and the abuse of the Israelis that are being supported by the United States of America corporations, you would have known it's an apartheid. It was right there in black and white. The facts. And I couldn't believe my ears. I said, oh my God, maybe there's hope for this planet. Maybe there's hope after all. I mean, if this Jew in government can finally acknowledge that Palestinian lives have value too, then maybe there's hope. And then yesterday or the day before, when I saw that Ireland and Norway and Spain were demanding a Palestinian state, I felt encouraged with that too. I said, well, maybe we can make it out of this. Maybe there can be a future for Earth if it wasn't for the cosmological events scheduled. So what a perfect time for any number of social experiments, wouldn't you say? Wouldn't you say that if you know everything is going to shit, wouldn't it make sense to have ETs coming in to do all of these horrible experiments, like infecting me with bioweapons that are adaptable, that are able to overcome any attempt at defense of the human body, that have a superseding power? I mean, I even have a tenderness in my ear, which means that the ones in my ear have just gone undercover too. So that's very frightening for me. And I think Elon Musk is an important part of this. He has already said that Neuralink does not require surgery. And if you already know that they're involved with advanced races, I'm not going to call them ETs, but if you already know that they're involved with advanced intergalactic races of people, then you know that they have access to advanced weaponry. They have access to sell the rights to advanced weaponry. These are just things we know. I think this dress is supposed to be worn like this. Okay. So these are just things that we happen to know. I'm sorry, I was just thinking about seeing Marcus Smith yesterday, the man that actually damaged my face. Because I'm looking at my face on the camera and I'm seeing the damage they did. And once again, I'm having that horrible feeling of how can anybody be allowed to do something like this? How can anybody be allowed to steal the inheritances from my trust funds? How can anybody be allowed to lock me in a concentration camp and gas me and steal my assets and commit fraud against me? How can any of these things happen? How can they happen? And I did nothing wrong. I was a model citizen, a model, a role model. I was a role model because it was important for me to know. No, it was important for me to be one because I had learned what a role model was when my mother was getting her graduate degree in sociology and would share with us the things that she was learning. And she talked about the importance of role models. So let's go on with the actual topic. That was my update on the biochemistry. Now let me tell you, I'm going to stay in the fringe space, okay? I first met Elon Musk in the alternate space outside of the third dimensional reality. Around the time that they were recruiting me to do reconnaissance in Arizona, they were using cyberspace to communicate with me, and we were developing a language system using cyberspace and outside 3D reality. Okay, like advertisements on the radio, or billboard signs in my neighborhood. Different ways that were being used to communicate with me. At one point, they even changed an email. Like, one email came to me with one bit of information, and when I looked it up in storage, it came back with different information. So they were even letting me know that they could get into your email box and change your email messages, so that if you ever wanted to go to court and use email as your evidence, if your enemies had enough technological sophistication and enough cyberspace hacking weapons, they could change your email. I've even had companies delete the emails that they sent me, delete the proof that they owed me so many free visits in a hotel for my continued participation in their incentive program. Things like this. Well, around this time, I don't want to give out my contacts. So this is what I'm going to say. I made contact with somebody in the third dimension. And through following semantic clues associated with that subject, with that person, I ended up going someplace. I ended up going to Scottsdale, Arizona, dressed like a rapper to go to a comedy club. And I was physically removed from that club by the police as the Jews in the audience watched me. And on the way, when I'm running, through the club to run away from the police, and they're dragging me over the tables and things, I'm screaming, "I'll switch! I'll switch!" Man, they had 2 fire trucks, ambulance, 4 or 5 police. I mean, when I got outside of there, I think they had called every single first responder in Scottsdale to come out after me. And I had a ticket to the show. But the owner said he didn't like the way I looked because I came in looking like a rapper. I had a Fidel Castro style hat that said dope on it in a little metal thing. I had some khaki shirt in camouflage colors, like the army. I had some cargo pants on. I looked like a professional drug dealer, I guess. I might have threatened the owner that I would cut in on his profits or something. But I was there to see a black comedian. I got there late, but it was really okay because there was a woman on stage, and she was a Jew, and she was doing jokes about body functions, gas. And I never thought those jokes were funny. I thought she was so offensive. So I was late and everything, but that was no reason to send the police and drag me out of the club. And while they're dragging me out of the club, these 2 Israelis, young Israelis, start jumping on my neck. Now, don't forget, I'm over 50. I'm like 60 when all this is happening to me. I'm 60 years old. And they're jumping on my neck, like this. I mean, I had to go to the hospital after that. And when I went to the hospital, it was the hospital in Scottsdale. Was it the Honor Health System? Anyway, the hospital was huge, and it was almost empty. And it was so dark, and I didn't see any other patients there. And that was when I first realized that these hospitals are fronts. These great big hospitals are reasons to import uranium and other radioactive elements used in x-rays and diagnostic tests. That these hospitals are not really for patients. They're for storing, ordering, transporting chemicals and raw earth elements needed for war. That's what I learned in that hospital. But the doctor refused to treat me. He had a homosexual orderly who was going to physically throw me out. I wanted them to take pictures of all the bruises on my back. And they didn't want to photograph them. They didn't want to document them. And ironically enough, the police had asked me, did I want to go to the hospital? And I said no, because I didn't want them to bring me there. I went by myself. And I actually had to call the police to come and make the doctor treat me, because they were threatening to throw me out and not treat me at the hospital, because it wasn't a hospital, it was a front. Huge campus, lots of buildings, no patients. Just like Memorial Hermann here in Houston, Texas. In Houston, Texas, there are hospitals. They're even expanding one of the hospitals down here across the street. But these hospitals are not about health cures and medicine or serving people's health. These hospitals are places where they can legally ship uranium, plutonium, cobalt, things needed for creating space, ships, and war machines. One of the hospitals at the parking lot where the Memorial Police, the Houston Sheriff, and the constable all came to attack me in the parking lot of Target after two big men threw me to the floor. Now I'm over 65 when this happens. They throw me to the ground, they handcuff me, they put me in their vehicle. All the other cops show up, I guess, to make sure I don't get killed. But the reason that they kicked me out of that public parking lot at a mall that had no customers, they were driving customers away. Customers were under surveillance there. I went to Macy's there 2 or 3 times, and it was weird, just weird, because it was obvious a place where shoppers had really been driven away. And you didn't know if it was COVID that actually shut the door. But being so far past COVID, why would it still be impossible to have a peaceful shopping day? So anyway, I was going to go to the American Girl doll store, but I was hanging out in the parking lot. It was a sunny day. I don't have a backyard anymore or a balcony. I live in a hotel, you know. So I was enjoying the sunshine from my car, and I had the screen up because I was doing some shadow boxing, you know. I was keeping my shoulders up. I was keeping myself in shape, doing some shadow boxing. You know, that's what I was doing in my car. But they had a whole surveillance window on the second floor of part of the mall, big open window that could look out on the highway number 10, but it could also look out on the whole mall. And then right across from there over here was a great big 20, 30-story hospital that had an air traffic control center built right in. Looked just like an air traffic control center. And so did this one, this observation station. But they were observing me so long that they knew that the reason, let me try some of this tiger balm on this mosquito bite to stop the itching. They knew my reputation from Arizona and California about exposing European nationalist racism and the takeover of America by the Europeans. They knew about my work that got me kidnapped and thrown in jail in Arizona, that I had to escape my team, you know, because of the semantic system, because of the messaging system we created. I knew exactly when to flee and just keep going. I knew when to flee and keep going. And they violated the law by calling my family the next day or within days of my fleeing Arizona to threaten my family that if they were giving me harbor, I was a fugitive from Arizona. That's what they told my family. Now, how they got the number of my children and my ex-husband, I'll never know. But they violated the law. They violated my human rights. If I valued their Constitution, you know, they even valued the Constitution, my rights to privacy. But they wanted to capture me. They wanted to lock me up. And since they couldn't lock me up legally with the fake charges that didn't stand, that were ridiculous, once they removed everything that social media disproved from the charges against me, because I was filming everything. Once they removed that I was not obstructing traffic with my car, I was parked in a legal parking spot, that I did not, and then they just were left with that I fled the police, but I was on the phone with 911 the entire time. So how is that fleeing if you're saying, are they after me? Or are they trying to rush somebody to the hospital? There's nowhere for me to turn off the road. There's no shoulder here. And there was no shoulder there because so many Europeans were stealing from the ancient excavations, from the ancient ruins in Arizona, where there are a lot of precious metals. Plus, there are crashed spaceships. If you look at the United States and you look at Arizona and Nevada, all the way into Utah, you can see that something big crashed into the earth right there. Something huge, a huge spaceship. So you will find ruins of things from other planet technology in Arizona, and you will find precious metals. And you add that to the ruins of the giants, when the giants built cities there, you can see the ruins plain as day. And the Europeans took that over and they protect it with road gangs. So in this strip of road, there wasn't even any highway. So the legal charges against me wouldn't stand. They wouldn't even let me speak in court. The district attorney, public defender representing me wouldn't even hear my story. When I sent it to him in email, he completely ignored it because they didn't want to have any legal obligation to represent me. So they decided that they were going to use something called a Rule 11, which lets you take somebody out through the mental system, through mental illness. You can say, you're not sane enough to stand trial, so we're going to lock you up in a mental institution until we think you are. And I even published my whole conversation with Sue Ann Decker on Facebook, so everyone could see the absurdity. So they pretty much left me alone. But all these people at the Memorial City Mall doing surveillance on me, they're aware of all that social media because they're keeping track of everyone. And because they have huge data centers, and because the telecom industry has given them free access to our phones, and because they have collected huge dossiers that include everything that can be known about you, they were able to see me as a threat and make me leave that mall, attack me, tackle me, throw me on the ground, on the cement, humiliate me in front of all the target people, because they were afraid I was going to expose the air traffic control center in the hospital, the strange traffic around the hospital, the lack of patients being treated in the hospital, the proliferation of hospitals along that street. You would think that everybody in town was sick for all the hospitals that were being built, and the expansion of things like the Houston Children's Hospital over there across the street, and the big pipes, 14, 15, 20-foot deep pipes that I first saw being installed in Scottsdale before they came, started to really try to arrest me and put me out of unalive me, or at least lock me up so they could kill me with their medicines. Before, they have those here too, and they're building them all along the hospitals. So we'd already determined that malls are not being used for malls. They're being used as forts and weapons distribution centers and weapons manufacturing centers. And we'd already exposed that the railroads were being privatized to lead from one private company all the way out to the sea, where they could be sent out through a private port. And I'd already exposed stuff like that in Brownsville. So by the time I got here and I'm sitting in the parking lot there at the Memorial City Mall, a city in Houston unto itself with its own police force, well, by then they kind of knew the danger that I represent to Elon Musk and the other Nazis and the Jews and the other Europeans, Scandinavians, Germans, Frenchmen, Britishmen, all of them that depend on us to get their wealth. Now, before I actually, talk about Elon Musk, I hate doing these super long reports, but let me tell you something very important about debt and the International Monetary Fund. When the other races of people in the world are able to contain the European threat, one of the first pieces of legislation must be passed to invalidate the debts. Debts made to Europeans are a part of an economic system that's circular, that keeps the money flowing amongst the Europeans. But here's the caveat. Where do they get the wealth from? The wealth that they turn into the fiat cash, that they circulate through their system, that they distribute to the Caribbean, that they distribute to Africa, that they distribute to Asian countries, so that they can build and develop, so they can have their own economy. All of that money comes from stealing my assets. Okay? All of that money comes from stealing the assets of Africa. So once you consider that Europeans have no legal entitlement to the assets that they have stolen by force from the peoples of the world, you'll see that their money is meaningless. So any debt would be ridiculous, because any debt is built upon nothing. There is no foundation for that debt. Do you understand me? If I rob you of all your assets and disable you from getting any more, and then I take those assets and I give them to Bob and Tom and Waheen, was it ever really mine to give in the first place? You see? So if you've got somebody going to Barbados and taking the resources of Barbados for themselves, be it the beachfront scenery or some minerals or access to marine life, whatever I'm stealing from the Bahamas doesn't really belong to me. So I can't take it out, launder it, and bring it back inside as an investment or a loan, because it was yours the entire time. It was always yours. I just intercepted it. So one of the first things that an international court would do, should the earth continue, is invalidate the European claim to the assets of other nations of the world. My assets have been stolen. The Department of Transportation, privately owned in Oklahoma, cut a huge swath through my land and took another bite. And they built things under the ground of my land. Things that bring them great profit. But they threatened to kill me if I even come into the state. They tried to ambush me if I even come into the state. And my other relatives, the educated ones that don't live in Oklahoma, where they're already so oppressed that they can't save themselves, us out here in the family, well, they were profiting. And they knew better than to fight with the United States government. They knew better than to fight with the Europeans. They knew that it would lead to having a life like mine, where you're being pursued, where you're being attacked, and you don't get any money. Because I wouldn't take the settlements. I refused to take their money because I wanted a legal case. I wanted the titles cleared, but they won't even let us clear the titles on our land. They keep the titles in the name of dead people. And then they substitute a woman from New York who entered into the oral history of my family and somehow got her name put in the books, the record books in Wewoka County. So all this kind of stuff is going on, you see, but as we begin to unwind the evil economic system, all that wealth comes back to me with damages, you see? So I don't need a lot of oil and gas to send rocket ships into space and keep them functioning there. I don't need to dig up all my land. I want to have pastures. I want to raise cows and lambs and chickens. I don't want to make oil and gas or minerals. I don't want gold. I want homes where my progeny can live. I want clean, fresh air. I want my well water restored and taken out of the centralized system. You see? And I'm an American. I should have a right to happiness. I should have a right to use my ancestral lands the way that I see fit. But rather than have that, we have had enemies come in, take over law, take over science, take over everything, and deprive us of everything. Now that is the era of Wehrner von Braun. Okay, but now we're in the era of Elon Musk. My God, I don't want to go on too long. So I'm going to do a second part. I'm going to do a second part of this because I don't want to take up too much of your time. And when I see an interview that's a solid 3 hours, it's not broken up, I feel like, oh, I don't have 3 hours to give. Sorry, I'd love to hear you, but not in 3 hours. So I'm going to be back with a second part.